How much of a delay are you and your colleagues planning for the exams next summer, the GCSEs and the A-levels? Good morning, Minister.
Good morning, Nick. Well, we wrote to the regulator back in mid-June about this issue because we knew that children had lost out on education because of the lockdown. That's why we brought back Year 10 and Year 12 part-time from mid-June to the summer to help ensure they're back on track with their studies for the GCSEs and A-levels that they'll be taking in 2021. So we have already asked the regulator to work with the exam boards to look at whether we can delay the exams by a week or a few weeks in the summer. They are looking at those issues. There are issues to deal with. For example, the term dates in other parts of the United Kingdom that use the GCSEs, so Northern Ireland and Wales and so on. So we're looking at these issues, and already they've consulted on the assessment processes next year to try and free up more teaching time, because we do want young people to be able to catch up on their studies over the course of this academic year that's starting today and over the course of this week as young people return to school.
So to play some of your words, a week or a few weeks, what is the maximum number of weeks that you think you might be able to push it to? 3, 4?
Well, look, these are the issues we are considering with the exam boards. It does depend on a range of factors. We've got to make sure that we get the exam results, the marking.
Well, this is my next
back
point,
in time for the A-level.
Presumably, I'm so sorry to talk over you, but you'd want the results in the same sort of mid to end August to allow the universities to do. So you're going to have to compress the marking, are you? Is that going to be an issue?
Well, all these are issues that have to be addressed if you move the dates of the exams, and we have looked at a range of issues about how we can free up teaching time, how we can to ensure that young people can catch up, and this is what the regulator is looking at with us and with the exam boards to see how we can most effectively do that. And we've been working on this really since mid-June.
And I'm sure you and your colleagues are equally concerned about the fact that the gap between so-called rich and poor students has widened by 46% in a year, so says the National Foundation for Educational Research. I'm sure you've been made aware of this story. Your reaction, Minister?
Well, everything we've been doing since 2010 as a government has been about closing that gap in attainment, and we don't want the coronavirus to cause that problem to resume in the long term. So that's why we've announced a £1 billion catch-up fund for schools to help schools fund catch-up programmes for all their pupils, and within that there's £350 million of a targeted specifically at disadvantaged pupils with more one-to-one and small group tuition, which is an effective way actually of helping children catch up from their lost education.
And while that is a vast amount of money, you'll be aware that the foundation involved, the National Foundation for Educational Research, says that the cost for schools in England could be around £700,000 in additional staff, cleaning and IT for a secondary, and £280,000 for primary schools. £1 billion is not a lot of money, but it's not going to cover everything, is it, Minister?
Well, it's designed for catch-up rather than for cleaning. We had a scheme leading up to the summer where schools could claim back extra cleaning costs where they had suspected cases of COVID in their schools, up to £75,000 per school, depending on the size of the school. We're also now in the first year of a very large spending increase for schools, £14.4 billion more on school spending over the next 3 years to cover. It should cover many of these costs, but we keep these issues under review, and if schools are struggling, we will look again at these matters.
What do you mean by that? We'll look again, so there are more funds available if necessary?
No, our priority has been to make sure that
what do you mean by look again then? I don't understand.
Well, because if there are schools that are struggling, we will always look on a case-by-case basis at those schools, and we have regional teams all over the country that keep these issues under review. But I've been to schools.
So there could be more cash available?
No, I'm not saying that. What I'm
what's
saying
the point
is
of looking there? So you have a regional team who comes down to look at the Nick Gibb Academy in Bognor Regis, and which is brilliantly run, but it could do with an extra few quid and a bottle of Dettol. What if they're not going to get the money? What's the point of having these teams?
Well, our teams are looking at all aspects of how schools are coping with this crisis, including how they're coping with opening schools, making sure they are safe, making sure that they have the bubbles, keeping children separate from one another, the extra hand sanitizers, the extra wash basins, the one-way systems, the staggered lunch breaks and so on, all the measures that schools are putting in place to keep pupils safe. Of course, we monitor those positions and we monitor how well schools are coping with these positions. But as I said, our focus is on prioritising prioritising funding, the £1 billion for catch-up, and also to make sure that schools are generally better funded, and they are being better funded as a consequence of the settlement we reached with the Treasury over the next 3 years, to make sure they can cope with these kind of expenses.
And what are you hearing, the early soundings, Minister, that all the schools are going back as predicted today? Are you hearing of any issue? I appreciate it's early, but they will be making their way. What are you hearing so far, Minister?
Well, we have, as I said, we have regional teams monitoring this position. We had a successful opening of schools in Leicestershire last week. The NAHT are predicting over 97% of schools will be open, and also the opinion polling is showing that parents are increasingly confident about sending their children back to school, which they should be. The Chief Medical Officer is saying that the risk of transmission of the virus within the school is very low, but the risks of not attending to the children by not attending far outweigh the risks of actually attending school, the risk to their mental health, to their long-term prospects of not being in school.
And as we all go back to school and hopefully go back to work, what's the percentage of your colleagues who are actually back behind their desks at the Department of Education, Minister?
Well, we are, the message very clearly...
No, never mind the message, Minister. I mean, would you say 50% of your colleagues are back behind their desks, 60%, 75%? What would you say it is, Minister?
Well, they haven't. Well, those percentages have not been reached in the building up until this point.
Okay, 30% are we at then, Minister? What are we at?
Well, we are saying that from today we do want more.
But what are we at currently?
Back in the school.
What were we at last week?
A very small proportion.
10%, Minister? Would you say 1 in 10?
I don't know.
So you're urging all the parents to get back to work, you're urging all the children to get back to school, and you've got probably 1 in 10 working in your particular department. How fair is that, do you imagine?
Well, we're also urging civil servants to also come back into the building. We have a huge raft of measures, safety measures in the building. I go into the department.
No, I know you do. You've been working like a Trojan along with Mr. Williamson. You and I talk regularly. But I just wonder how many of the boys and girls who work with you are behind their desks and I think it's probably less than 1 in 10, don't you?
And that has been the position, but we want it to improve and increase. Right. And the message very clearly now is that it is safe to return to the building, and that's the message going right across Whitehall.